Takuto descends into the abyss that is known as death. He has struggled with illness throughout his life, and now, at the age of 18, he can no longer cling to the precious gift of life. He expected this moment, so he takes the death rather calmly. He descends into eternal darkness as his consciousness fades away. Is this what death feels like? Just falling off miles below, unable to feel anything ever again? Wait a minute, his hand just scratched the surface. What could that be? It feels like a rock and smells like grass. Or his 5 senses coming back? The place keeps getting brighter. What's happening here? Takuto wakes up in a different world from his and in a different body from his. It's a really cold world with fresh air. Could this be life after death? A strange lady comes in to check up on him. Wait, that's not a strange lady. Takuto recognizes the dress. There's no way that this is possible. But he can only trust what his eyes see at the moment. It's Ato, and he calls her name for affirmation. She answers, "Yes, my king." Ato is one of the hero units in the country management simulation game called Eternal Nations. In this fantasy world, you play with several nations and races that exist, trying to dominate the world in a turn-based game. Just one playthrough can take over tens of hours. Takuto spends all his time playing this game, mostly because he spent his days from one medication to the other after his parents stopped coming to see him. The game helped him forget about his loneliness, and with time, he became a top player. He was so good that in the rankings, they started to call him the legendary player. Thanks to the Ato unit's existence, he could accomplish his only feat before dying, clearing the game. Takuto can't wrap his head around what is going on, so he demands an explanation from Ato. Ato is rather friendly, and she even surprises Takuto by calling his name. She goes on to affirm that she knows about his in-game feats, the first ever nightmare difficulty clear, playing as the hardest nation, the civilization of ruin, also called Minagra. It's this player that is officially recognized as a legend, Ida Takuto. How does she know this even as an in-game character? Ato tells him that she remembers everything. She remembers how they conquered the world together, and even the times they failed and got game over. On the other hand, Takuto always remembers playing with Ato's policy. With his weak body, he always hoped he could become like her. It's simply mind-blowing to talk to her in this place. Speaking of this place, where exactly is this? Ato isn't too sure, but she can confirm that it's not heaven. It rather feels like the Eternal Nations world. It's an unknown world, but Ato is just relieved to be with Takuto again. That's when she approaches and asks him, "Can we start over again together?" Takuto doesn't understand what Ato means. Ato makes it clear that no matter the world, she would love the opportunity to build a kingdom with him again. Takuto considers the offer for a while. He has a new healthy body and he would surely like to do some things with it. Maybe building a kingdom isn't such a terrible idea. He agrees to the proposal. Okay then. Ato the sludge, bastard child of the ruining mud world, works to build a new kingdom with Takuto. The system notifies Takuto of the quest he just took on, building an evil Minagra civilization with Ato. Takuto earned his nickname for a reason. The first thing he does is settle in for brainstorming with Ato. Minagra is generally reputable for its internal administration. It also has a hand in combat, making it a super specialized country in domestic affairs. Meanwhile, in the forest in the dark continent of the Cursed Lands, there's a meeting in the shadows. I mean, it's already a dark continent. The meeting is about something that must have happened recently because a bad omen is felt on the land. They must act fast. Their people are already in enough trouble as it is. Meanwhile, Takuto takes his first step towards building an empire by making a bug. Baby steps, right? He uses the emergency production in the system to make a long-legged bug for the scouting unit. It proves to be an ugly but useful creature, as Takuto orders it to examine the land around them. The orders are to survey the land and avoid contact with other beings. The bug then obeys. Looks like there's no bug in its system. And what's more, Takuto can share visions with the creature. This sounds like it would come in handy. Takuto and Ato go over their expenses. Takuto used 100 MP to make the bug and has 100 left. He might be very powerful, but he doesn't have a lot of mana to waste right now. Ato isn't doing much better herself now. Even though she gets stronger with time, her current strength level is still very weak. A kingdom without military strength, how nice. Takuto senses from his connection with the bug that the forest is quite a large place. There are no food icons yet, but the bug is yet to encounter wild animals or monsters either. Ato says that having no monsters around is a bit strange. Then again, they might be taking advantage of the forest's concealment effect. She apologizes for her king for being of little help, but Takuto insists that having her by his side is enough for him. For a hero from an evil country, Ato sure can blush a lot. The moment is ruined by the bug. The monster informs Takuto that it's found a settlement in the forest. It's a settlement of dark elves. Dark elves are neutral creatures, perhaps a little closer to evil than good. Ato says that it might be bad news if these elves are from another country's colony. With that said, there's a higher risk of war in the future, and that's something they cannot handle at the moment. Before doing anything rash, they decide to watch the elves and get more information on them first. What they don't know is, at that very moment, a group of dark elves are heading their way. Perfect timing, universe. The Dark Elves are in a settlement within the forest. Unlike what Takuto and Ato feared, they don't seem like such a mighty settlement. Rather than mighty, they look worn out and pitiful. Captain Gia thinks deeply about how to save his people. At first, the elves prioritized feeding the children first, but now, food has run out even for the children. He must leave the forest to search for options outside, just like he knows what the captain has in mind. Elder Moltar, the leader of the Dark Elves, summons the captain. He can no longer stop Gia from leaving the forest, but he warns him about the dangers on the outside first. According to the Elder, there's a great evil in the uncharted lands of the forest. Captain Gia understands the Elder's concern, but it's gotten to a point where he can't watch his people die without trying to do something. He decides to mobilize a special force to search for food. The Dark Elves are face to face with Takuto and Ato. Both parties are unsettled, but the elves are more terrified. Takuto has the shape of a human, but that's the only thing even slightly human about him. Is this the manifestation of evil Elder Moltar talked about? Captain Gia realizes that the fate of his entire race might depend on what he says here, or how he conducts himself. And so, Captain Gia, together with the rest of his company, gets on his knees in front of the evil king. He introduces himself as Gia Nagiv, a dark elf from the Mazuramu clan. Still on his knees, Captain Gia apologizes for entering the forest without permission. Having seen the elves' disposition, Takuto and Ato are much more settled now. Ato puts Takuto in a place of power by questioning the elf's decision to enter the forest. The elf tries to explain the actions of his clan by talking about the history and where they lived. He intends to calmly explain the whole decision so that Takuto and Ato might have mercy on them. But these guys are in no mood for a conversation. Captain Gia explains that the clan was persecuted and chased out of their land. With nowhere to go, they ended up in the forest. The evil king finally says something, commenting on how skinny the elves look. Wait a minute, the creature can actually speak? Captain Gia is even more scared as he pleads for his life. The captain explains how the elves ran out of supplies after a while in the forest. Till now, they haven't found food and everyone is starving. For the elves, it's a matter of life and death now. They plead with the evil king for their lives. All they ever wanted was food and shelter in the forest. Is trying to survive really a good reason to punish them? The elves are ready to accept any punishment from Takuto and Ato. Surprisingly, Takuto tosses them an apple. He orders them to eat the strange fruit and says the fruit tastes great with rabbit. The elves look at the strange fruit tossed to them by the evil king. They don't know what it is, but they've been ordered to eat it. This could go two very different ways, but they have no other choice but to eat the fruit. As they chew the succulent apples, they cannot believe such a sweet food exists in that forest. But Takuto isn't done with them. He also offers them some pears to eat. Pears? The elves are skeptical, and Ato demands to know why they would refuse the king's benevolence. Captain Gia explains that even though he's hungry, children are starving in his village and they need the food more. What a selfless man! Captain Gia begs the evil king to let him take the supplies back to the elves. The elves are asking a little too much, but Takuto allows them to go back to their village. It's truly a sad sight to see, as starving children close to death are comforted by their mothers. It's been a good fight, but they might as well close their eyes now. Thankfully, Captain Gia and his search party return just in time. Immediately, they start to share the food supplies with the members of their village, starting with the little children. The village rejoices. Nobody expected Captain Gia to return with such a large supply of food. For the first time in a long while, the elf children are active again. Having this many provisions was just a tall dream until Captain Gia bravely decided to take a huge risk. At the moment, the captain is like a hero to the villagers. However, there's one villager that doesn't agree with Gia's actions. It's Elder Moltar. The elder scolds Captain Gia during their meeting, saying he's made a huge mistake. He insists that the evil being would never give help without wanting some form of compensation. Besides, why does Captain Gia address this being like he deserves any form of respect? Captain Gia disagrees with his leader. How else would the village have survived? They can only argue right now because the so-called evil being was benevolent enough to grant them provisions. Meanwhile, back at the evil king's place, Ato expresses her displeasure at Takuto for wasting their mana on those elves. Takuto insisted that he pitied them after hearing their story. He just had to help, even if it meant wasting their mana for emergency production. The emergency production command uses mana as a resource to manufacture all sorts of goods. It can produce anything available within the nation's facilities and units, but the resources needed to produce the chosen item directly relates to the mana it consumes. It's also possible to produce raw materials and food, but it's not possible to create strategic resources with it. The mana cost of these goods can be lowered with technological advancement and specialized buildings. With the use of mana, Takuto could give Captain Gia enough food for his people. Ato is unhappy with Takuto. The plan was to conserve mana, but he had just spent it on people who were next to strangers. Takuto notices that his faithful subject, currently his only subject, doesn't feel happy. He recognizes his wrongdoing and apologizes to her. Then he asks her for a favor, making it clear that he can't do it without her. If that's a magic trick, it certainly worked, as Ato immediately forgives Takuto and even apologizes for getting angry. It's that easy, huh? So on to Takato's problem, he tells Ato that he had communication difficulties yesterday. Ato didn't notice it yesterday. She thought Takato was role-playing a strong king who dislikes being talkative. If that's what he was going for, he really crushed it. Unfortunately, Takato has a communication disorder. He thinks back to the time he spent alive. During that time, he never really talked that much with the doctor and nurses at the hospital. Apart from his parents, Takato doesn't remember holding a conversation with anyone. Ato insists that it's not that bad. A king can choose to only talk to his trusted advisors or something like that. Also, in this game world, any problem can be solved with wealth and military power. Again, their conversation is interrupted by Bug. This time, Takato personally summoned it back to base. The Bug informs Takato that the Dark Elves are close to their camp. They must be coming to take the rest of their food. Takato intends to use the opportunity to ask them to leave the forest after that. But then again, he doesn't know how to communicate with them. Thankfully, he has Ato for that. Just as Bug said, in a little while, the Dark Elves arrive at the camp of the Evil King. This time, they are led by the Elder himself. He prostrates before them and introduces himself as Moltar Cordal Mazaramu, the leader of the Dark Elves. Ato is rather rude, and she asks the Elder to state his business in the camp of the Evil King. Even though they're not strong enough, they must keep role-playing as strong characters for now. Elder Moltar apologizes for whatever wrong Captain Gia and his traveling company must have done. He also thanks Takato for providing his village with much-needed supplies. He begs the Evil King to overlook any wrongdoing, and simply asks for his name. Takato doesn't know how to respond to that, so Ato introduces him as the ruler of the ruin, King of the Apocalypse, Ida Takato-sama. She orders them to refer to him as Ida-sama or Ida Takato-sama. As for her, she introduces herself as Ato Dono, and commands that her title must not be mistakenly exchanged with that of Ida-sama. Wow, such humility. With the introduction done, she asks the elves to take the food and leave immediately, but Elder Moltar pleads for a way to repay them. Finally, negotiation leverage. Looks like Ida made the right choice by letting Ato take charge of the negotiations. It's almost like he's jinxed it, because Ato starts to lose it and question the intentions of the elves. That's not good at all. Ida would prefer the negotiations to end peacefully, so he quietly calls her attention. Ato complains that the elves are really bad at negotiation. Sure, it's just them. Ato goes ahead and suggests that they should just kill the elves, else they might turn against him. Okay, calm down, lady. They just need to find something where both parties would profit. That's how negotiations usually work. If the elves leave, they would return to a place with nowhere to sleep, so they won't survive for long. Also, they are already suspicious of the Evil King, so Ato mustn't throw them off like that. Back to the negotiations, Ato accuses the elves of seeing Ida as a naturally evil being. Seeing how thrown off they are, she demands that the elves would have to pay tribute to King Ida-sama. The elves need to know what kind of tribute they must pay first of all. Ida and Ato simply ask to know about the outside world. Just that? It shouldn't be a problem. For Ida Takato, there are two reasons why he doesn't want the elves to remain in the forest. The first reason is that their race belongs to another group. If it's anything like the game he played or the life he lived, people of different civilizations can easily cause conflicts. The second reason is that these dark elves are neutrally inclined, naturally. Since he is building an evil nation in Minagra, the land will eventually get cursed. Such land isn't suitable for them. Ida intends to use the forest as a base for the nation he intends to establish. Elder Moltar asks the king for permission to reside inside the forest. To be fair, King Ida-sama saw this coming from a mile away. Ato immediately refuses, saying that the elves must leave after completing the agreement. But Ida Takato looks at the elves. They will surely perish if he sends them away. And so, as Elder Moltar thanks the king and leaves his audience, Ida Takato calls him back and makes a suggestion. The elves should become citizens of the Minagra. What is the king thinking? Ato requests a private audience with the king. She needs an explanation as she can't wrap her head around Ida's suggestion. These elves are neutrally aligned. How does Ida plan to deal with that? Ida explains that he wants to recruit them through the refugee system. This way, their alignment would change to that of Minagra. That's one way to look at it, but what about the possible conflicts it would cause, especially when the main races of Minagra are produced? Well, if they're anything like the bug produced by Ida, coexistence shouldn't be a problem. They discuss for a while and Ida finally manages to get Ato on board. Ato conveys their decision to the elves. Ida offers to give them protection in exchange for being his citizens, but to be citizens of Minagra, they must turn to the evil side. Think about it properly. Evil is surprisingly a fun side. A couple of days later, Ida-sama and Ato Dono take a walk through their growing kingdom. Ato is still not convinced by the elves' intentions. Do they really plan to serve King Ida? Ida encourages her to give them the benefit of the doubt. After all, there are merits to living with these guys. Among the Minagra creatures, the homunculus reproduces fast and is always happy, but they aren't intellectually as capable as the elves. That's why in the past, Minagra's intellectual buildings always ended up being behind other nations in research. Adding the elves to the population automatically solves that demerit. Also with the elves, they can have civilized conversations, something that was impossible in the past. A little while later, Ida and Ato get to the elves' camp. A ceremony is held and the elves prostrate before him, as a sign of acceptance as their king. The system sends a message. Due to the influx of citizens, a new nation was created under a great leader, Hail Managra. Atto congratulates the Dark Elves on their acquisition of their citizenship into Managra, and promises them that happiness and peace will be promised to them in the name of their king, Ira Takato. While one of the elves asks Gia if the ceremony has ended, all the elves begin to feel hatred rising from deep inside their body, specifically for those who persecuted and drove them out of their land. Takato asks if they're alright, to which the elves in tears burst out praising their new king. Some days later, Atto and Takato are seen reading a document, revealed to be information about the area from Elder Moltar, and are frustrated upon learning that the two largest countries on the continent are hardcore good aligned, one being a human nation that worships a good god and the other being an elven nation that worships nature. Atto laments about how they'll be instantly annihilated if either of the nations were to find them. To make matters worse, not only would the nations with maximum hostility to Managra be very dominant powers, but the forest's productivity is zero, meaning they have no available food, minerals, or mana to use, making the forest a horrible location overall, with Takato describing their predicament as one that cannot even be measured as a difficulty level but is an outright critical situation. Just then, Elder Moltar came, offering to continue exploring more about the world, but not before asking them if anything is wrong when he sees their worried expressions. He's accompanied by Gia, who brings along Emuru, a female elf in charge of intelligence. Gia states that since she's very knowledgeable about the traditions and information of other countries, she could be of use to him. Atto commends them, saying the king is satisfied with their dedication and hopes for good results. She also tells them there's no need to be formal, saying the king doesn't like strict formalities, with Takato thinking the stiff attitude makes him uneasy. Just before the Elder Moltar continues from where he stopped, Atto tells them that she wants to explain plans, saying she's assigning them posts as important people in the nation's administration. She puts Elder Moltar in charge of the country's management and assigns Gia the role of captain, telling him to lead the warriors of Managra, which they humbly accept. However, Gia seems too enthusiastic and says he will give the order to the men at Takato's command, declaring that they would gladly even kill babies for his sake, referring to the people who persecuted them. However, Takato objects to the idea, saying that war is a scary and barbaric ordeal. While he agrees, internally he's angry and baffled as to why the King of Ruin is a pacifist. Atto tells them to rest in their meantime and after that, possibly build some proper houses. The Elder Moltar then thanks them for their words and boasts that he can be of service in several areas, unlike Gia who only boasts of his strength. Atto, observing that they're workaholics, asks Takato if she should order them to collect materials or choose where they build. He then suggests that she orders them to improve the terrain without destroying the forest, to which the Elder Moltar agrees, admitting that while they are not as good as light elves, they prefer using the trees rather than bare ground. However, Gia is confused again as to why the King of Ruin wouldn't want to simply destroy the forest. Takato tells them to not forget to reforest, but the Dark Elves are confused as to what it means. It is later revealed that their level of magical technology is much lower than what Takato expected, with them only knowing of 4 elements instead of 6, and Takato expecting their technological level to be around smelting, fishing, and fortress construction. Atto believes that now that they know that the level of magical technology is very low, they would gain a huge advantage if they speed up development. She then explains the concept of reforesting to them, telling them it's simply planting trees in an area previously deforested to preserve vegetation. While it doesn't seem like it needs much magical technology, she further explains that since trees take so long to grow, reforest focuses on growth acceleration using magical elements. Then Atto suddenly begins to praise Takato, giving him credit for creating reforestation and saying he is capable of things greater than they've seen him do, much to Takato's surprise. Emuru then asks about a plague that happened in a city named Qualia some time ago, the priest of the city believing it was a curse from a demon. Atto then explains that the disease was most likely caused by the spread of germs via rats. She also tells them that while there are several methods of dealing with it, bloodletting and praying are not very effective. With this, she declares that the king has spoken, even though Takato hadn't said anything. She also tells them that Takato came from a land of gods, filled with many blessings. Emuru then talks about the grapes Takato gave them, joyfully saying she planted the seeds and can't wait to see them grow. While the others scold Emuru for planting them without Takato's permission, Takato begins to think to himself, soon discovering that he can use emergency production to create anything from the other world. He then smiles evilly as he realizes just how powerful his power truly is, and that given enough mana, he could create the resources that shaped warfare in the other world. He then assures Emuru that it was right of her to plant the seeds. We then move on to an explanation of the continent of Idoraya, configured like 2 circles connected to each other. The South Continent is called the Dark Continent, and the North Continent is known as the Lawful Continent, controlled by the Holy Kingdom of Qualia, ruled by humans, and the Elementals Alliance of Elnar, ruled by elves. The 2 major countries are building diplomatic relations, one of the major contributors being the ultimate weapon, a saint. In the polar belt in the extreme north, monsters are attacking the nearby villages. Some of the locals then beg one of the 7 great saints, Saint Soalina of Splendid Burials, to help them, to which she defeats them with little difficulty. Later, she discusses with the cardinal about investigating the omen of the disaster from the Great Cursed Lands, offering to go herself if dispatching troops is too difficult. The Cardinal then explains the troops cannot be mobilized on a whim, and that she can't simply choose to go there if she wants. Saint Soalina, with a calm but determined look, silently insists. The Cardinal then reluctantly leaves, saying he'll personally talk to someone who can mobilize some troops. Meanwhile, in the Managra territory, the Dark Elves are getting ready to begin building, marking the beginning fortification and expansion of the Managra nation. Takuto has changed from his hospital gown, has had a stone pedestal crafted into a throne, and has built a council room. Thinking to himself, he reasons that since mana is collected monthly and the amount of collected mana is proportional to the degree of happiness of the citizens, the happier his people, the more developed his country. Therefore, he sees it as his responsibility to guide his people to the ultimate happiness. First, they make plans for building for producing food. While Atto and Elder Moltar agree that Takuto can produce an infinite amount of food, as their territory expands, distribution problems would arise, so giving the citizens harvesting facilities would be necessary. Atto then gives Elder Moltar a tree, telling him to try to plant it and grow it. She explains that it is a flesh tree, a tree that bears fruit that is a taste akin to human flesh. While Elder Moltar respectfully objects, saying some might be opposed to the idea of eating human meat, she assures him that it is simply for an experiment. Next, they make research plans, starting with magical technology, specifically military magic due to its wide range and effect, as opposed to regular magic, which can only target a few dozen people at most. Atto believes it's not that hard of a technology, so it can be developed quickly. After that, they make plans for military affairs, stating that they need a hero. When Gia asks them what they mean, Atto explains that they are powerful subjects of the king, monsters with some loose screws capable of becoming stronger as time passes. Atto explains that due to restrictions, they can't summon all of them, but they can summon one. Takuto further explains that while an army will be created at some point, having an entire army will not only make them conspicuous, but will also require a lot of maintenance. However, with a hero, they can ward off bounty hunters aiming to kill Dark Elves or sell them to slavery. Elder Moltar questions if heroes truly have that much strength, to which Atto gives a demonstration. Tentacles sprout from her bag, and she instantly cuts down several trees behind her effortlessly, revealing herself to be a hero. Again, she assures them that she will destroy all of Takuto's enemies, so military affairs aren't a problem. Takuto then tells Atto to clean up the mess she made, to which she forlornly agrees. A month later, the Dark Elves have made great progress with construction. Emuru then gives reports on the progress of operations, telling them that since efforts are mainly directed towards growing flesh trees, construction isn't moving very fast. However, the joint facility for cultivation and food storage is proceeding smoothly. She also tells Takuto that for water supplies, a spring has been found and there are plans for boring wells in the future. Despite all this, Takuto believes his first achievement is restoring the morale of the Dark Elves. When Emuru asks if all of it is to his liking, he smiles, saying he's glad to have them as his citizens, to which Emuru breaks down and cries, thanking him. Emuru later states that daily necessities are still lacking manpower, to which Takuto assures her that he'll take care of everything for the time being, seeing that the quality would suffer if production was rushed. Emuru also worries about the absence of a palace with personnel, and at first, Takuto tells them not to worry, but later changes his mind after Elder Moltar insists and Atto explains the benefits of having one early on. Takuto then talks about how he would like a floating castle, much to the shock of Emuru and the Elder Moltar, who are in awe that such a thing could even exist. In the Holy Kingdom of Qualia, there is a religious post known as the Holy Knight. Mighty warriors who are trusted and favored by the people and are capable of working miracles, falling short only of a saint. Yesterday, 2 of these Holy Knights, as well as a troop of mercenaries, were sent to investigate the danger over the Great Cursed Lands, according to Saint Soalina's visions. One of the Holy Knights, Lornius, prays to the Holy God Arlos for protection, while the other, Wardle, shouts at him to hurry up. On the way, while Lornius tries to deduce the reason behind the recent disturbances in the northern provinces and explain the Qualia has very little wiggling room, Wardle, the high-ranking Holy Knight, is laid back and even bored of the ordeal, but commends Lornius for being able to hire 50 mercenaries. Lornius thinks to himself about Wardle's vulgar behavior, annoyed at the fact that if this investigation were to succeed, Wardle would be rewarded, whereas if it were to fail, all responsibility would be on him. Despite all this, he does agree that as a high-ranking Holy Knight, he increases their chances of survival. The head of the mercenaries, Bargo, then warns them of witches coming from the north. Meanwhile, Emuru reports to Atto that the flesh trees have been completed as planned, thus providing a steady supply of food to all residents. Emuru then questions the nature of the forest due to its dark and gloomy appearance. Atto then explains that it is proof that the land has become Inagra's, explaining that not just the people, but the very soil changes its alignment according to the king's majesty, buffing those who are evil aligned and debuffing the defense of neutral or good aligned beings. While she doesn't notice it at first, Atto tells Emuru to take a deep breath, after which she feels more refreshed than should have been possible. However, while both do agree that the cursed soil is beneficial, they also agree that it is too conspicuous. In a bar, while Wordle compels the mercenaries to eat and drink to their fill, Lornius contemplates how they will survive the Dark Continent. especially considering that they were unable to secure enough provisions and the many dangers that await them in the Dark Continent. When Bargo asks Wordle if it's proper for a holy knight to drink alcohol, he simply waves off the question, saying the scriptures say nothing about the consumption of alcohol. He then jokes about holding a holy debate for that later, all while Lornius looks at him in mild disgust. Lornius then asks him what is really happening in the Great Cursed Land, asking them about the witch Bargo mentioned earlier. While Wordle claims to have no information, Bargo tells him that it is believed that the mayhem of the northern region was caused by a witch. At first, he thought it was simply a name for some magic creature, but he can't get in touch with a contact of his who went there to investigate, so he doesn't know. Lornius is then troubled by the fact that there is a being that not only escapes the intelligent network of mercenaries, but holds a threat equal to the northern region. Mayhem is possibly residing in the Great Cursed Lands. Wordle then mentions the Dark Elves, saying he has a hunch that they're to inspect them if it's possible that they'll cause problems. According to Bargo, Dark Elves specialize in curses and assassinations, and that the ones who are named are on the run. The named elves are revealed by Wordle to be Moltar the Cursed Sage and Gia the Assassin, saying he once fought Moltar and considered him to be a formidable opponent. He tells them that since the order was only to do inspection, they shouldn't make a scene if they came out and should retreat immediately if things go south. Lornius objects, saying they should be ready to fight, should there be menace of evil. But Wordle tells him that while they may have to lay down their lives one day, there may be a reason for him as well as all of them to live. Lornius then agrees to this, admitting he does have a reason, and Wordle deduces that he has a lover and jokingly tells him to quit. Later, the troop encounters a hill giant. Lornius, while expecting hostile beings to freely roam around, didn't expect to immediately see one that needs at least a whole army to subdue. Bargo then asks for help, stating it's difficult for the mercenaries to handle the giant alone. Lornius then says they could use their bows for diversion, but before this could happen, Wordle steps in front, telling Lornius to tell the archers to stand down and that he would go. Wordle readies himself to fight the giant. Lornius asks if he'll be alright, and Wordle assures him that he'll be fine, and that it would be a problem if the enemy's attention shifted towards the archers. He positions himself in a stance and prays to Arlos for strength to prevail. The sword begins to emit a bright light, blinding the hill giant. It is then revealed that he is using the rumored holy sword arts, a secret technique of Qualia which involved the conducting of sword arts and the strengthening of the mind and body with prayer and God's divine might. A technique that doesn't just strengthen the mind, but gives the user an advantage against evil beings. Wordle deals blow after blow to the hill giant and cut its foot clean off while claiming that a big body isn't enough to defeat him. Again, he continues to land hits until finally, he cuts the giant's head into two. After, he tells them to move quickly before other hostile beasts are attracted to the blood stench. Lornius follows with a little smile, while Bargo is in disbelief at what just happened, telling Wordle that he's incredible. Lornius says that with the holy sword arts, the inspection should be a breeze. However, Wordle has his doubts. Meanwhile, in the forest, Taketo is summoning long-legged bugs, using flesh fruit and mana. Atto deduces that since he's making more long-legged bugs, it must mean he's planning to summon Isla, queen of all insects, who adds a permanent enhancement to all insect-type units. He explains that large military units require lots of people and cost a lot of money, so he'll produce and train individual units, which is not only more cost-effective, but means the individuals can be upgraded. Also, while Isla is very peaceful, the other heroes could have unintended consequences. Taketo then says he'd like to deploy more scouts so they can take measures in case the surrounding cities notice the cursed land effect. For now, they're busy with the construction of basic structures, but he still wants a country where everyone can be at ease. He wants to live in a country of peace with Atto and everyone else. Suddenly, Taketo feels a disturbance. Just as Atto predicted, it's the mercenaries led by Wordle and Lornius. In no time, the army gets to the cursed forest. They know the legend of the cursed land, about how it doesn't allow any life inside, so they are well aware of the risk they're about to take. One of the mercenaries shows Lornius the map of the forest. If they go straight, they would easily reach the northern part of the forest, but he suggests that they investigate the forest area first. Lornius knows that their army is not a big one, and it would probably take too long to investigate all parts of the mighty forest. He believes that the focus should be on investigating inside the forest, so he instructs the group to go directly inside. They're within a few feet of the forest, but Wordle stops them. It must be because of something he saw. Someone is standing just in front of the forest, blocking their path. This person is covered in a black robe from top to bottom, but from her body shape, they can tell that it's a young girl. Lornius and Wordle believe that the girl is a dark elf, but how can a girl travel in this cursed forest by herself? She must be a lucky survivor. They drop their guard a little, and Wordle calls out to the strange lady to introduce herself and state her business in the cursed forest. She seems rather calm and well informed, as she can tell they are holy knights from Qualia. She introduces herself as a dark elf, one of the many dark elves that fled into the forest. Since it's introduction time, she requests to know about their business in the cursed forest. Wordle refuses to answer the question. He reminds her that she's yet to answer his question about traveling in the forest. What are the dark elves doing in this forest anyways? The holy knights continue to converse with the lady in their path. She reveals that the elves were chased out of their homes and had no other place to stay. The cursed forest is the only place that has brought them peace. Wordle is a bit more relaxed with the reply he just got, but he still asks the stranger to let them inside the forest. They have a business to handle after all. However, the strange girl in robes insists that they can't enter the forest and advises them to go back home. Wordle is of the mind to continue negotiating, but Lornius cuts in, declaring that they only take orders from their god and mustn't be refused. This act vexes Wordle. He scolds Lornius for interrupting the conversation. Lornius apologizes on the outside, but in his mind, he believes that he didn't do anything that deserves such an apology from Wordle. The friction keeps growing between the pair. Lornius makes up his mind to report Wordle's actions once they get back home. Wordle confirms that they are following orders from their superiors, so they mustn't leave without searching the forest. But the girl insists that they might scare the peaceful elves if they were allowed inside. Wordle demands them to know why she's particular about them not entering the forest. On the other hand, she asks why Wordle's group is so obsessed about entering the forest. The reverse card is played. Wordle has no other choice. He tells the robed stranger about the prophecy. According to the prophecy, a disaster will arise from the forest. That's why they can't just leave the forest like that. Lornius is displeased by Wordle's latest act. How could he just reveal the top secret of their mission like that? He confronts Wordle, who argues that sometimes you have to take the risk and reveal the secrets. But then again, these dark elves are under suspicion of belonging to an evil cult. What Wordle just did is betrayal, a sin against the nation. The robed stranger cuts in, saying that the Holy Knights shouldn't be worried about a possible disaster. The elves just came from a difficult journey and finally found peace. The last thing on their minds right now is to cause any disaster. Wordle asks her to swear in God's name, and she swears it in the name of her god. Wordle is satisfied, but Lornius notices something off-putting about the girl. The girl has an aura of evil existence around her. She is clearly not a dark elf. After the girl swears in the name of her god, Wordle is convinced of her intentions and decides to leave. He calls it on his troops to turn back, and they do. Everyone but Lornius. The knight has had enough of Wordle's soft negotiation skills. How could Wordle easily believe this girl when she clearly has an evil presence around her? Wordle insists that he's not letting the girl go. They're simply here on an investigation. The investigation is done. There's nothing wrong, and it's time to go. At this point, Lornius has already felt the evil aura, so nothing can convince him otherwise. This is the aura of someone who could bring disaster upon the Holy Kingdom. There's no chance that the investigation is already over. What started as a slight disagreement now turns into a heated quarrel, and Lornius is bringing most of the heat. He brings up the rumor about Wordle and innocent girls. In the Holy Kingdom, there's a rumor that Wordle has a thing for young, innocent girls. He accuses Wordle of abandoning the mission after being seduced by this girl. That's a little too personal, and it infuriates Wordle a lot. He calls it a baseless rumor, and even if it were true, why did Lornius have to bring it up right now? In the end, Wordle takes Lornius off the mission. Once emotions get in the way of the mission, it's already compromised. Lornius doesn't take the sacking well. The confrontation starts to get more physical. That's when the girl cuts in and asks them to cut it out. She swears that everything she said was true, and the knights don't need to resort to blows. Lornius takes one more look at the girl and sees the aura again. He disobeys Wordle's order and points his sword at the girl. Wordle goes to intervene, but he's stopped in his tracks by a knife in the back. It's Vargo, one of the mercenaries, who stabs him. Vargo insists that he was hired by Lornius, so in the event of an internal quarrel, he must pick Lornius' side. In a short while, everything descends into chaos. Lornius and some of his men try to capture the girl. Wordle and his men try to stop him, and both groups draw blood from each other. At this point, the girl sees it can't be helped anymore. She takes off her robe and releases her power. It's not a dark elf, it's Atto, and she doesn't hold back anymore. Many of the mercenaries are either dead or injured already, but once the rest see what is happening, they stop fighting each other and focus on Atto. Even Lornius and Wordle are forced to shake hands and end the quarrel, as it's their only chance of surviving against Atto. Wordle asks all the group messengers to escape and inform their country about what's going on. It comes as a shock when he sees that the messengers have already been killed by Atto. She warned them, but they refuse to listen. Right now, she has no choice but to annihilate them. Lornius and Wordle don't recognize Atto, but they remember the saintess' prophecy about the evil in the cursed forest. Atto stands there with her tentacles on a killing spree. If that isn't the evil they were warned against, I don't know what is. Atto calls their attention and talks down on them. She says they should have still left while they still could, but now they have no chance of survival. Big talk, but the Holy Knights feel like they can hold their own if they really tried. They draw their swords and pray to their god as usual. Wordle looks around and sees a few mercenaries left standing. He calls on them to draw their bows and fire at Atto. That's cute. Atto isn't intimidated in the slightest. She relishes the challenge in front of her. They fire the arrows, but with her tentacles, she easily parries all the arrows away. She sure is cocky. According to Wordle, there's one more secret that not even Lornius knows. In the prophecy told by the saintess, there were monsters who turned many countries to ruin. It's confirmed that the Northern Mayhem was caused by witches. At the moment, only 2 witches have had their existences confirmed. Atto might just be the 3rd one. Oh crap, they are screwed. Lornius struggles to believe what Wordle just told him about the Northern Mayhem. The army and Saintis tried but couldn't resolve the issue. How could it have been caused by individuals? Are they really that powerful? But there's no time to think as they're surrounded by a very powerful enemy. Wordle calls on the remaining mercenaries to support them as they jump in to engage Atto directly. Atto teases them a little bit, sending her tentacles their way. The girl likes to have fun. Wordle is quick enough to avoid the tentacles and even cut one off. One down, many more to go. Atto is impressed by the knights. They're stronger than she previously thought, but it's nothing she can't deal with. The technique Wordle used is the one which uses God's blessing to deliver a divine strike. The technique involves self-sacrifice, which explains why the Good Civilization unit doesn't have enough men. Wordle clearly plans to go down with her, but Atto has plans of her own. Wordle attacks again, this time evading even more tentacles from Atto. He manages to take out another tentacle. That's his plan, to take out all her tentacles. Lornius also gets in on the action, taking out a few tentacles of his own. Atto decides to adopt another strategy against the Holy Knights. She picks up some mercenaries and uses them as shields. Surely, there's no way Holy Knights would risk harming these helpless men. Lornius loses his cool again, and Wordle needs to call him back to order. After all, they have only 2 tentacles left. Cut those tentacles and they would surely win. Wordle and Lornius attack Atto, even with the risk of killing the mercenaries while trying to get to her. Atto didn't expect this move. Why would Holy Knights just set these guys aside? Is it because they are mere mercenaries? She seems helpless to defend herself, and that gives Wordle the courage to advance without guarding himself properly. That's her opportunity and she uses it well, sending another tentacle right through Wordle's head. Looks like she had other tentacles that the Knights didn't take into account. Big mistake. Atto makes sure Wordle dies a gruesome death, sending the tentacles in and out of his body like it's knitting. Wordle is stopped in his tracks by Atto's tentacles, and he dies immediately. The Holy Knights counted 6 tentacles, and they made sure to cut every one of them. How could this happen? Lornius is physically and mentally damaged. He never really liked Sir Wordle. Maybe he feels affected because he knows that he's next. Meanwhile, Lornius isn't the only one affected by Sir Wordle's death. The mercenaries flee too. If their most powerful warrior was just killed like a common flea, then what chance do they stand? Soon they scatter in different directions, and Sir Lornius doesn't stop them. Lornius encourages them to run. He requests that if anyone makes it out alive, they must take the information back to their country. Atto doesn't intend to stand there and watch them escape. She goes after them, but her path is blocked by Lornius. If this is his last sacrifice, then so be it. The Holy Knight says what could be his last prayer for protection to his god, and then he jumps to confront Atto. He uses the might of his shining sword to deliver a blow to Atto, but she blocks it with a shining sword of her own. Wait, when did Atto get a sword? And why is it shining like a Holy Knight sword? Atto, with a smirk on her face, explains that she got the sword from Wordle when he died. As for why the sword shines like a Holy Knight's, she took the accumulation of Wordle's skills, honed technique, and devotion when she killed him. She is capable of absorbing people's powers, and from the looks of it, Wordle used to be a very strong and fierce warrior. At this point, she defeats Lornius more physically than mentally. As if that's not enough, she absorbs feelings from her victims as well. She says that from the absorbed feelings, she can tell that Wordle was a really brave man, and it's obvious that he died because of Lornius' short-sightedness. She doesn't just stop at that. She talks about Lornius' wife and newly born daughter. She even calls their names, emotionally torturing the knight as much as she can. Lornius doesn't understand how this is possible. Then he remembers that Wordle used to know their names. This means that for everyone Atto kills, she can absorb both their abilities and memories. Just how dangerous is this witch? While she still tortures him, she lets him know about Wordle's dying thoughts. The Holy Knight was careful to avoid defeat because he was thinking about Lornius' family, the mercenaries, and the people who were counting on them. Wordle put all these into consideration, but Lornius had to ruin things with his short temper. Sir Lornius is broken but remembers that he has one last hope. The mercenary successfully escaped and should come back with the Holy Army. Even if he dies now, it's mission accomplished. Atto lets out a burst of long-lasting laughter. Clearly, Lornius isn't aware of his surroundings. Sir Lornius looks back and sees dark elves coming up from the hills behind him. They report to Atto that all the runaway mercenaries have been dealt with. Wordle is dead, and the mercenaries that hold the information are dead as well. Lornius is completely broken now. Atto drains Sir Lornius of his physical and mental strength. The Holy Knight doesn't even resist any of her moves anymore. She picks him up with her tentacles and turns him upside down. You would think that she would take it there, but no, she chooses to torment the knight even further. She is truly a citizen of Ida Takato's evil country. Atto talks about how things could have been much different if only Sir Lornius listened to Wordle. They would probably be home by now, and Sir Lornius would be enjoying a nice meal with his wife and baby, praying to the god that he loves so much. She reminds him of how much she begged him to maintain peace. In the end, everything is his fault. All the people he came with are gone. The information is gone, and Sir Lornius is about to meet a very painful end. As a parting gift, she reminds Lornius that she has information about the whereabouts of his loved ones and promises to kill them one by one, even in the village where he slept on the way. She doesn't plan to exempt that place. Whether they are 10 or 100 people, she plans to kill all of them. Even though she knows that it might be evil, she would willingly do it for her master's sake. And so with that, Atto bids farewell to the Holy Knight. She cuts him into two, right from the middle. The Dark Elves who watched from behind can now cut in. Captain Gia praises Atto as he's in awe of her strength. He orders his men to deal with the bodies. But first of all, he needs to know whether she truly meant what she said about going after Sir Lornius' family. It turns out that she just said those things to torture him further. She denies being a pacifist, but the Dark Elves don't have a clue what that means. From the information she absorbed, something troubles Atto, and she wishes to report to her king immediately. A little while later, she gets back to Ida Takato and gives him detailed information about what she encountered. She brings up the topic of witches that was discussed during the battle. It's not a familiar concept to Ida, as he never heard of the witches while playing Eternal Nations. The name of other countries and the existence of the Saintess are also concepts that he had to be taught. With these facts, Ida Takato can deduce that certain things are different from the game in this world, even if there are parts of the game system applied. The implementation is different sometimes. Another thing is that from the Holy Knight's memories, it's obvious that the nations have been at peace for decades. If this is truly a game, then it must be full of amateur players. But then again, Atto couldn't take his memories of other people in the Eternal Nations games. From now on, they can't just rely on Ida Takato's in-game experience for information. It's now clear that he wasn't transported into the game, but into a whole new world. There's also a problem with the information about the northern region's mayhem. The investigation came as a result of an oracle bestowed on the Saintess. But these guys don't trouble Ida and Atto. The one who really troubles them is the one that initially caused the mayhem, Edenoki, the Weeping Witch. These witches are said to have powers more or less equal to that of a hero. This means that Edenoki is just as strong as Atto, if not more. On the bright side, the game's hero creation system is finally functioning, and Ida Takato intends to put it to good use. It's getting clearer now that Minagra would soon face threats from external enemies, and some might wield a lot of power that would cause them problems. Ida Takato has to give deep thoughts to what he's pondered for a while now. Is it time to form an alliance between countries? Worried about the witch's progress, the Council of Elves needed a report on how much ground she had covered and what they could do to clip her wings. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, the war against darkness is taking a tragic turn, as most of the warriors have died. Seeing this, the Lady Saint of Subjugation deploys into the battlefield, even when her subordinate informs her it was risky to engage in battle without the Cardinal's consent. This didn't stop the Saintess, as she wanted to use everything in her power to end this madness and secure victory. The damage that happened was reported. Over 32,000 soldiers were lost to the witch, and 2 cities in the northern region were also destroyed. The casualties in the smaller towns and villages were beyond count. These options were between contacting a long-forgotten allied human nation, the holy city of Qualia, and deploying the Lady Saintess to the battlefield. In the elves' meeting, one of the leaders complained that they lost contact with Weisnar, the Torwise tribe's city's representative. The Torwise tribe has turned against the elves. To grace the elven pride, the majority of the council was asking humans for help, and they went with the latter, as a last resort. Also, the holy city of Qualia had their hands full because of the witch they had to face in the northern region, so it was the elves who were supposed to send them help. At the end of the meeting, the elves sent out the Saintess and their spirit knights so the issue could be resolved immediately, unaware that the Saintess arrived at the battlefield, asking for forgiveness because she couldn't save a lot of people, and decided to leave for the front line, even when the remnants of war tried to stop her. The excuse was that the Cardinal had already left the place a long time ago. Meanwhile, things are quite eventful in the Dark Continent. The mages who ran the nearby neutral country near Minagra were strong and able to easily deal with the most ferocious beasts. The beast warriors that served the nation acknowledged that the mage, who would later be known as Tonakalipo, one of the Sherman elders, was much stronger than them. They agreed to deal with the orc's corpse later, thinking this was the end of this confrontation, but when they looked ahead, they saw a large number of reinforcements and ran along to let everyone know, torn between facing the orcs or misleading them. In the Dark Continent, the Cursed Land, on the Minagra Palace construction site, Atto asks about the progress of the work. The young female elf monitoring and supervising the construction reports to Atto that the work was progressing smoothly. They were ordered to work on their living environment first, but it is everyone's dream to build a befitting palace for their king, and they did the work happily. Atto goes to meet Takato-sama, the king of Minagra. She explains to him that she feels they're connected by kin or relation, so she might have hurt his feelings as a human when she killed the Holy Knights. even though the thrill and excitement she got from impaling the knights is unrivaled. She expects the human Takato to find it disgusting, even though he's said to be evil affiliated. She was worried about him and asked him to confide in her so she can help. Takato said there were many things, but since he's with Ato, he'll be okay. She should just take care of him. After a while and lots of enthusiastic efforts from the citizens of Managra, the palace is finally completed and the king, Ida, and Ato could move in. It was a majestic building fit for a king, and it also had a mana generating feature that would increase mana production and put the miasma Ida had to good use. Ida sits on his throne and Ato begins her reports and briefings right after she explained the mappings and locations of areas in the kingdom. Managra is steadily gaining power and balance. The citizens are all submissive and respectful towards their king, Ida, revering him as their god and his right hand, Ato. Ato then realized something, that the one thing missing for a king and its government is human resources, someone to do the miscellaneous work. At best a caretaker for the king. Why would a magnificent king and the representation of evil do his laundry by himself? He needs to be dignified. Ato and Ida also agree that the palace is too big for just 2 people anyway. Another added benefit is that getting a caretaker would make Ida communicate more, as this is a challenge he now faces. The problem now is, Ida could not bring himself to speak to a grown-up woman and men. He even had trouble communicating and giving out orders to Gia and Moltar. Ato soon got a fantastic idea that would solve this, though it sounded off at first. She then ordered them to gather up all the young female children elves in the country for the king. This sounded bad, as it looked like the king had finally shown his evil side, molesting young girls. But somehow, Ato is able to pass across that the king wanted future retainers that would be his caretakers, and the gathering will be followed by a selection process. The elves then saw this in a new light, one where the king cares about them and their attention on their jobs enough to offer to take care and teach their children. It gets even better. There were female children, and female dark elves having a job or specialty was very rare. They thanked the king and hurriedly gathered young females for the selection to be held at the king's palace. When the selection process began, the girls were presented to the king in their numbers, and due to Ida's appearance being shrouded with evil, pressure-filled miasma, the children all burst into tears out of fear of danger and for their lives. Ida isn't excited about this, but doesn't blame the kids. Gia then remembers a set of twins that he wasn't certain were presented. He asks Moltar if he brought the twins, and soon their private bickering caught Ato's attention. Ato asks for more details about these twins. The twins were orphans with no next of kin, though they were brilliant children, and Moltar feared they could not be considered normal or worthy of being a caretaker to Ida. Ato, with authority, affirms she would be the judge of their eligibility, and asks that they are presented to Ida. Soon enough, a pair of twins are presented, the pair looking different from one another, as the elder sister, Mari, looks adorable and an average pretty child, while the younger sister, Carrie, had scabs and scars covering half of her body. The twins both enter the palace, and in the presence of the king, they show no fears or tears, as Mari greeted Ida with a smile on her face, while Carrie showed indifference. Intrigued, Ato asks Carrie how she got the scars on her body, and Moltar explains that she had a disease earlier in her life, and the scars are a result of the disease that once covered her entire half. Now that explains her demeanor and why she didn't cry like the other kids. Ato couldn't understand the elder sister, Mari, as she seemed like an average young girl. Ato asks what Mari's backstory is, and the reply was shocking. Mari wasn't just like any other young female. This pair of twins ate their mother. This was Carrie's reply when Ato asked. Moltar then explains that her mother self-sacrificed for her children and the tribe during their darkest tribulation, when they faced devastating hunger. They ate their mother to survive through that time, and so did everyone. Ida then realized that when he gave them the human flesh tree, it probably brought back bad memories, which explains why they were sobbing and in a pool of tears. They were reminded of a time when they ate their kin to survive. For this selection, Ato didn't really care about the past, and given the children could hold conversations with Ida, even when around his evil miasma and seeing his scary appearance, without bawling their eyes out from crying, they had passed the selection process for retainers. Things like that didn't matter, and it was all left to Ida to decide if he would keep them as caretakers or not. Ida, excited that he finally gets to talk to people, agrees to make them his caretakers, asking them if they thought they were up to the task. Being his caretaker would require following a lot of instructions, and children most times don't. But Mari enthusiastically says she'll be his caretaker, and the nonchalant Carrie agrees as well. For the next couple of days, the twins did sloppy work in everything they did. Ida naturally didn't expect much from them since they were kids, so they were not punished at all. Mari found this weird and unexpected, as they both did all the haphazard work on purpose, to anger him so he kills them off or punishes them brutally as an evil king. Mari asks Ato if he was truly a bad person, and trust me, Ida's response is quite something. Ida explains that a bad person is someone that could do or did what he wanted, someone with the choice to do both good and bad. A bad person does what he feels is right for him, and that's someone who's truly free. The reason they both did work haphazardly, looking for the quickest route to death, is because they are weighed down by the guilt and burden of their sins, killing and eating their mother. When Ida understands this, he simply asks what did their mother say when she sacrificed herself, and in truth, their mother did say live on. Ida then explains that their mother did what she thought was right and so did they at the time. There's nothing to feel guilty of or give up on life for. Just like their mother instructed, they should live on cherishing that life their mother gave them. After successfully convincing them to get off that suicidal energy, the twins and Ida get along and spend time together before being joined by Ato. She just got back from exploring the Dragon Veins cave and had findings to report. Next up was her report about the findings she had made exploring the nearby areas and areas close to the Dragon Veins cave, a huge spot for mana and currently imploding with energy. Ato had discovered a nation close to the Dragon Veins cave. For a neutral nation dominated by humans and beast folks, the country of Forngon is located in a second choice place. This is a result of their city, Dragontan, which the Dragon Veins cave houses. The city produces mana itself as its resource is the ever-imploding mana spot. Meanwhile, in Forngon, a hill giant appears and charges towards the city walls. These monsters have terrorized the city frequently, but the number of attacks has grown recently and more than usual. The warriors stationed there try to stop this giant from reaching the city walls, but it looked more like they were struggling to stay alive than protecting the walls. The giant easily overwhelmed them, injuring them in their numbers. When they realized this was more than they could handle, some soldiers hurry to get the Sherman elders to come to the rescue like they have seen before. After a while and out of the blue, vines round the giant up, immobilizing it and causing it to drop to the ground. Soon the one responsible for this showed her face. It was the youngest Sherman elder. More accurately, a candidate for the title of Sherman elder. Her name was Lady Penelope, shortened to Lady Pepe. She celebrates her easy victory and soon gets the warriors to celebrate with her, chanting her name and the Sherman elders. Contrary to what they thought, the giant escapes the vines and is about to attack Pepe when another Sherman elder, an elderly beastfolk woman named Lady Tonacalipo, saves the day together with a candidate Sherman with more magic to deal fatal damage to the hill giant. The Sherman elders have a meeting to discuss another pressing issue. But first, the other Sherman compliments them on saving the day so easily once again. Lady Tonacalipo makes a comment about how wary and worn out she had become over the years as age waned her abilities. A dense Pepe who had no filter proceeds to concord that the elders do not have many years left and begins to give a terrible massage that matches her terrible words. Tonacalipo defends her vibrance, saying she is still in her prime at that old age. Down to business, Chief Sherman relays their next agenda to them, which is going to Dragontan. This came as a shock to Tonacalipo, even though she was excited that she finally got to do real work. She thought the country of Forngon had abandoned Dragontan since they proved selfish and stubborn. Fortunately, that was not the case and they will be sent to Dragontan to investigate the cause of this new wave of monsters attacking the city and assess the state of the Dragon Veins cave, the country's prized resource. Tonacalipo asks the chief if he was ready to face or counter the consequences of this journey as they could lose their lives on the journey. More importantly, sending the best to the country of Forngon had to defend it on a journey would leave the country open and unprotected. Even though it meant leaving the country undefended, they needed to go. After realizing how important the Dragon Veins cave is to the country's well-being and power, thanks to the chief's persuasion and a few days of preparation, the duo rounds up a few beastmen warriors and they set off on their journey. With the able chosen few, they get to Dragontan to meet a couple of dark elves, led by a little girl who happened to be Ato with Gia and some dark elf warriors accompanying her. The aura and miasma Ato's group had were frightening to Tonacalipo and the beastmen folk, and so scary to the point their instincts to either attack or run started to kick in. Immediately, Tonacalipo read the situation and realized that the intention wasn't to harm them. She ordered all the beastmen folk to stand down, and even though it was hard for them to fight every strand of muscle in their body aching to flee or fight, when Ato sees this, she's also convinced that the beast folk were not intending to attack, and asks Gia and the other dark elves to lower their weapons until commanded otherwise. Ato is also fascinated by the fact that these individuals were not human. She then tried to analyze their capability and possible next move, and so did Tonacalipo. Tonacalipo realized that Ato was one monster of a little girl, and this group was no match for them, so the wise decision was to not anger them. With tension hard enough to break a window, both groups waited for each other's moves until the dense and cloud-headed Pepe, who didn't or rather couldn't read the room, broke this tension in a good way. She introduced herself as Pepe, asking if Ato could tell her name. With this, both groups understood each other's intentions, and Ato was able to amicably bring Tonacalipo to see the king, Ida Takato, all thanks to Pepe's naivety. Without conflict, Pepe clung onto Ato as they went to the palace in Managra, telling her of her exploits and happenings. The whole elven group returned peacefully with Tonacalipo filled with excitement to meet this king in the forest, while also dreading how powerful he could be. The entire group joined except the beast folk, who decided to roam the exterior parts of the forest as the miasma in the forest was more than they could handle. Tonacalipo was only coping with the miasma thanks to experience and old age. On getting to the palace, they meet the king, Ida Takato, and Tonacalipo realized she was right, but her imagination was just a tip of an evil iceberg that waited for her. What she stood before and recognized was not just a king, but an evil god, who could be capable of chaos and colossal danger. But once again, Pepe is so airheaded that she naively approached Ira, asking him if he wanted to be friends after she introduced herself. This scared Tonecalipo because Ira wasn't a being to be tampered with, but she is soon surprised when Ira replies saying yes, he would love to be friends. The rest of the room all celebrate the fact that their loved king who had communication issues is now in an active conversation with a total stranger. But this all seems strange to Tonecalipo, who is still trying to figure out what the hell is going on in the room. That's all we have for today. Don't forget to subscribe so you'll be notified if we upload part 3 of the series. Until next time, bye!